Welcome to Your Epic Pursuit. I'm Mike Mooney, and this is a space where we dive into inspiring and real conversations with people to explore their leadership journeys around performance, struggles, and quite honestly, just living in the pursuit of their goals and missions. And our conversation will flow through the epic lens, as it typically does, EPIC being the acronym for excellence, presence, intentionality, and curiosity. So we're going to hear themes and hints around those words throughout the conversation. You'll probably be able to pick up on them. And again, our goal here is really super simple. Goal is to provide insights, frameworks, ideas that will help accelerate and inspire you along your personal or professional pursuit. And that's it. So I am so excited to have today with us Mark Mohammadpour, who is the founder and chief well-being officer of Chasing the Sun, which is a company that is dedicated to empowering professionals to prioritize their well-being so they can thrive at both work and at home. Mark is also a certified health coach and personal trainer, which we'll talk a little bit more about that on his journey that led him to where he is today. I think it's an incredible story of his own pursuit. But before launching Chasing the Sun, Mark was also a senior executive at several global public relations firms for over 20 years. So now, out of that corporate world, right, Mark shares his messages through keynotes and trainings around the world, wherever he can be sharing Chasing the Sun and that mission to help people with their well-being and thriving in this life. So, Mark, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on today's show. Thank you so much for making the time.
Well, thank you, Mike. And it's just one of the most wonderful things about Chasing the Sun is meeting new friends like you and having the opportunity to have this discussion to impact others. So thank you for having me.
Oh man, my pleasure. It's a great story, and I'm glad we have the opportunity to share it. So why don't we start back with the catalyst? Like, you're in a corporate position. I mean, senior roles. You're doing big work with some significant brands of Adobe and Microsoft, Samsung, the Army. I mean, major global brands. Um, and then Chasing the Sun, right? Where was the catalyst for that to make that transition for you?
Yeah, so this was around 2017, and I was about 15 years into my public relations career. And I was thinking about what the future looks like. And I was thinking about where my strengths were. And I was taking a lot of pride, Mike, in the teams that I was running. When you grow in your career, you're shifting from tactician to strategist to leader to an advisor, trusted advisor for your clients. And as I was growing in my career, I was really passionate about the teams that I was running, ensuring that they were healthy, ensuring that there was limited turnover. And I realized I was good at it and I had the proof. Coupled that, Mike, with my own personal journey. In 2007, I was 350 pounds, and on the scale, it was bad enough, but I had sleep apnea. I was breaking chairs in restaurants, trying to fly from Portland, Oregon, where I lived, to New York for a business trip, sitting in a coach seat. It was pretty miserable. And I was scared for my life. And I made a number of changes in my diet and exercise, and I've managed to lose and keep off 150 pounds ever since. And when I was and that was around 2017, around 10 years since I had started that journey. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about where strengths were and where the opportunities were and about my weight loss story. And I started chatting about that more with my public relations friends, my communications friends, and that message started to resonate as I started to share ideas around burnout, around physical health. And in 2019, the opportunity to launch Chasing the Sun happened. And I took a leap of faith in saying, okay, I want to be able to help my public relations and communications friends with their physical health. And that came through coaching and workshops. Then over the course of the pandemic lockdown, and then coming out of that, the opportunities to talk bigger picture around well-being, around the well-being of teams, how to create a culture of well-being came to prominence as I was working with companies on big picture stuff around how to keep your teams healthy, how to create a healthy bottom line. And it's just been a wonderful journey. And so now I'm delivering keynotes and leading workshops and offsites to be able to create relatable, practical, actionable approaches to employee culture and well-being. And it all started with the weight loss journey nearly 20 years in, and that's where we're at today.
Man, I got to tell you, that is incredibly impressive in terms of your commitment to saying, I'm going to make this change in my life. I mean, it's one thing when we see people, leaders, there's people in the world who will talk about something, but they don't necessarily walk their talk. And I would suppose for you, what helps you today, I would imagine, is the credibility of you saying, no, listen, this is like, I have been there. I've been in these places where my health was jeopardized. It was impacting my mental health, my well-being, all these aspects of my life, as you were talking about, travel, and interacting. Even, I mean, I can't imagine breaking chairs, right? And what that experience was like. Uh, but you are a living testament of saying, look, I'm going to take these steps and I'm going to walk this talk, as challenging as it might be. So I'm I'm a this is great. And one little sidebar I would like to know in this, because I'm a big believer in the idea of detaching from the outcome. When we have a big, big goal in front of us, it is easy to get just overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of this big goal, this mountain that we're going to try to climb. And yeah, I think you know where I'm going with this, right? And I just believe, because I've seen it work, championship level race teams and executives, myself included, that if you detach from that outcome, if you just think about what are the steps that are required of me to get there, and then more importantly, what is the step I have to do today and right now, then the pursuit and the journey begins, right? And you can do it in a way that's manageable, that there's grace for yourself in there, because we're not always going to be our best in every moment. So I'm just curious about how, or perhaps was that even a thought of yours? Like, did you have to detach? You're talking about 150 pounds. That's a human right there. It's another human. What was that from a mindset standpoint of having to detach or approach that goal?
It's a great question. It started with my breakfast. I didn't go into this journey thinking I was going to lose 150 pounds. I said, look, what's in my control? I used to go to local coffee shop. I still do, but before I used to go in and order a 500-calorie mocha and a 500-calorie scone. And by 8 a.m. every morning, I had 1,000 calories in my stomach. I said, what could I change? I needed caffeine. And I put need in quotes, but we need caffeine.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch to green tea to 0 calories. I realize it's a 180-degree switch from a taste scale, but from what I need is zero. And I switched to a breakfast wrap that was 300 calories. So just that alone, I cut 70% of my caloric intake at breakfast,
Hmm.
and then made other adjustments to my diet, not eating so late at night, making sure I was incorporating more physical activity, and doing some trial and error. How that relates to what I do today, to your, when I deliver keynotes and toward the end, I ask the attendees, okay, what's next? I tell them I want them to go on a listening tour. So we talk so much about making significant overhauls to our team, but we have to start small. So much like I did for breakfast, I want people to do some research and to talk to your teams and have some 15, 20-minute conversations, talk about what's working within the team, what's not, and then coming out of that are the next steps to be able to make some changes to the culture within the team and ultimately help improve that. So that, Mike, is how I've been able to transition my my eating journey, my weight loss journey, to talking about how to improve the well-being of the teams. And to your point about the small steps having big impact, that's how I've applied that approach to the talks that I deliver.
Yeah, because the reality that we're experiencing, in my opinion, really is the culmination of the choices that we've made along the way, and more importantly, what I call like the choices in the micro moments, right? Of making a small decision of, I'm going to have the wrap instead of the scone, right? And then doing that again, and then doing that again, and doing that again until that becomes more of the habit than it is something that's different in the norm. And I love the way that you take it to that small step of the listening tours, to go around and have leaders talk to their people, understand what's happening, because you have one thing in your mind, but there's probably a different reality out there that others are experiencing too, you know?
Cannot agree more. This is about communication. The study showed it takes up to 7 times of communicating a message before it lands. Think about purchasing decisions you make.
Yeah.
Think about if you're at a company and understanding about company benefits. How many messages do you need from HR, your managers, your executives about things before you make a change? And this is something I think we forget about. We
Mhm.
don't want to overwhelm people, but at the same time, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of others when it comes to receiving that information. It's okay to over communicate. And what happens, Mike, is that over time, much about your point about repetition and again, it's also about this kind of compound interest
Mm.
about doing the same thing again and the repetition and building awareness, building your brand and what that means over time. So the investments that you make with people, you might not see that return right away, but in the coming weeks, months, years, decades,
Yeah.
they'll be coming back to you. Relationships will be built. And it's just incredible. It's one of those things that's really difficult to see in real time, much like the change at breakfast, much like going on that listening tour, but you are going to see that change if you believe in it and just show up.
And staying with it. It's the gradually then suddenly, you know, program. And I'm a big believer, man, that if things are going really well in your life, or there's a particular area in your life that you're really happy with, could be your finances, your health, a relationship, spirituality, whatever that might be. I would encourage you to think back 6 months prior to the habits you started to put into play and that you consistently put into play, you know? Conversely, you know, if you're not happy with a particular area, then think about 3 months ago and what you stopped doing, 'cause it takes longer for us to see the benefit and the outcome than it does for it to drop off or wane if we stop doing it, which is why I love that idea of the consistency, right? And just believing and committing yourself to it. Yeah, it's so powerful. So as we think about your journey, and this is where I'd love to learn more from, and this could be from the corporate experience that you've had over those 20 years leading teams and groups, or it could be from what you're doing now, in fact. But I'd love to know, you know, a time when you had to make a bold decision that maybe some people on the team, maybe even yourself, maybe you questioned, right? But ultimately you went with it and it actually changed the outcome that you all were facing or looking at. I look at these crossroads, whereas leaders, sometimes we have these gut check moments where it's like, am I going to do this? So I have the information. I understand there are people who are concerned, but I really believe this is the way that we've got to go.
I remember one in particular was as a result of doing one of these tours and chatting with a large team, a large virtual team with folks in other offices. Is probably 10 or 15 years ago, and as a result of that, we made two decisions. One is we had to open up a completely new job opening because there was a need within the team, but we did not have the skills to be able to take that. So we had to make a decision to stand a new role up. And then we also learned that there was not a good fit for an individual on the team. And we were concerned that if we kept them on that team and we were listening, they might leave the firm. So we had to make a decision and make a push for that person to come off of this particular business
Mhm.
and recommend that they, you know, join another account, which there are a number of steps involved in that, right?
Yeah.
Because if a person is you know, when you work in an agency, they are billable and then they're not. And so there are a number of steps you got to take. You also have to make sure that individual recognizes that we're going to make this transition to benefit them, to benefit the client, to benefit the agency. So there's a lot of communication that comes through that. You have
Mhm.
to communicate to the client about why this is important to them. You have to communicate to the team as well why we're making this transition, why it's good for the employee, why it's good for the team. So you know, you don't scare people by when we have these future
Oh,
conversations,
oh yeah.
be
Yeah.
able to say, okay, if you have this chat, then we're going to take you off the business.
Yeah.
It
Am
comes down
I next? Is it me?
right.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yep.
And so it comes down to transparency and understanding that this is going to benefit not only the employee but the company, and here's why. And so which is why I think these conversations are really critical. But it comes down to trust. It comes down to listening, and then the biggest part of it is actually doing something with the information you have. This is something we see so much, especially when it comes to employee surveys.
Mm.
We survey our employees just to say we do it, and then nothing happens. I think employees will answer a survey every day if they know that they're being heard and action is being taken place. Where people get annoyed are, oh, I don't want to take a survey, but it's not because of taking the survey, it's because they know their company isn't doing anything about it. And so that's critical. I'd rather not survey your people at all than waste people's time if you're not going to actually act on it. And so to me, that was a big learning. It was a little bit of a scary moment because these are people that you work with every day, you care about.
Yep.
You realize this is, there's certain people it's best for them to work elsewhere, and it's something against their skill or acumen or anything like that. It's just what's the right thing for all parties involved.
For all parties. And that's difficult because you are juggling the client, you're juggling the team dynamics, you're and the individual as well. And then to your point, what precedent am I setting here? Because now I'm going to have a lot of people second guessing or wondering when we have a conversation, what are you really trying to get at? I love your point there about transparent conversations and communication, not just communication, but transparent about the why and the benefits, the rationale of this, and then obviously asking for feedback with the intention of actually doing something with it. That's powerful. That
100%.
oh, how
Another
about
area as relates to transparency is around finances. And,
hmm,
I worked with some executives in the past who are scared to talk about how well the company is doing from a financial perspective with their employees. And I, on one hand, I understand it, but on the other hand, it's, these people are adults. They can vote. They can buy guns. They can buy alcohol if they're over 21.
yeah,
They're adults, and we need to treat them as such. And it's better to be transparent around finances and how things are going versus just being very vague, and that doesn't help people either. And I think that's another area within transparency and around well-being, right? Where we talked about well-being primarily as terms of physical health, but also talking about the financial health of your company. And the more open you are,
that's right.
the better it's for all involved. And that takes a lot of trust. And I understand that, but I think respecting your employees as people and as adults and as part of the solution and not someone to scare
Yeah.
is a mindset that we need to all have as leaders.
I want to stay on this for a hot second, Mark, because you've given me thought about the power of these listening tours. Yet when I think about that from two different perspectives, it's a dicey proposition sometimes. In my opinion, as I'm thinking through this now, and I'd love to get your thoughts on how you either walk that tightrope or set an expectation where you manage what the outcome is going to be. So, for example, if I'm on the executive side of this, there's maybe a little something in my mind going, am I going to open up freaking Pandora's box here? Is
Mhm.
this going to turn into a bitch session about everything that they don't like about the company or their teammates or me for that? What am I about to unleash here by going on this listening tour? On the other side of it is the employee who might say from previous experience, like you said there, well, yeah, I've been asked before, but they don't do anything with the information. Or no, I'm not gonna put myself in those crosshairs. I'm not gonna tell them what I really feel is going on here because I want my job. I don't want to end up on someone's list per se, right? So I'm just curious, like as and maybe more of a practical, actionable, like how did you go about navigating those things, whether you knew they were there or not, but to have productive listening tours where people knew they were heard, but in a safe environment, but you were focused on the things that you were really there to hear or wanted to understand.
It's a great question. And I think the biggest thing is before we go this, you need to have a timeline. You know, say, look, we're going to go through this program over the next 4 to 6 weeks, for instance. where I'm going to have one-on-one conversations, or in some cases, I've had two-on-one conversations where I might have, my second in command is not the right word, but my a partner, and they and I would have a conversation with folks and say, over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to have 30 to 60-minute conversations, and we're going to have very specific questions that we're going to ask. We might send the questions beforehand, but want to have a dialogue around it. It could be around their career, right? So in some instances, we want to talk about how their time at the company is and on the team. What are they interested in working on? Other topics might be around time management. It
Mm,
could be around the relationship with their customers and the clients. Other questions could be around other vendors or partners they're working on. It could be a combination of all of them,
mhm,
right? So it's just having that in advance. And then before starting it, having a conversation, whether it's part of an all team meeting or email communication, and saying, this is the purpose of this.
yeah,
This is the process. We're going to wrap it up by this date. And then within a week or two after that, I'm going to come back, share findings and recommendations. Sometimes it needs to be a little bit longer. Sometimes we need to talk to executives or other folks about things and what we're going to recommend. So that's part of it. But it's also speaking with executives or other folks and saying, look, we're going to do this.
mhm,
The response might be a little messy all over the place. What we're going to do is we want to manage the conversation so that they're open, but also valuable,
mhm,
and also something that we can make changes on. And if there are issues as it relates to harassment or things that might be more appropriate for HR, then there's sort of a branch that needs to go off and be able to say, thank you for sharing that. These are conversations we need to have with human resources, right?
mhm,
But to sum up, this needs to be communicated out in advance as far as the timeline,
yep,
and
yep,
understand what we're going to ask, and make sure that we're not setting anybody up to fail, what the point of it is,
right.
and taking time to reflect, and then coming back to folks. And Mike, sometimes those are one-on-one conversations with the people following up, or sometimes, we don't need to do that. It can be a one to many based on what we've heard and common themes. And so
Mhm.
there's really a lot of strategy behind it.
Yeah,
And
there is.
but it's very powerful when done right.
And that would thank you for like literally breaking it down. That's exactly what I was hoping for our listeners to think about, because this is so important. Yet if you don't go about it in an intentional way, right, with presence, to think about, okay, what are the implications? How do we want to communicate it? What is the timeline? Hey, this is not a gotcha session. This isn't going to be something that's going to come back and bite you. This is for the betterment of the organization, your well-being, the organization's well-being. So that was awesome. That was like a master class from an absolute comms pro to say, this is how you do this work to have productive conversations with the organization. And I love how you said in some cases it can be one to one, it can be one to two or three, it can be one to many, right? Just understanding the information you're trying to get is the most powerful piece. I love that. I love that. Thank you for breaking that down. So I have one more question here, and it's about leadership principles, right? I think, as we go through our careers, we pick up on different strategies. We read books, we pick up on different insights, like, oh, that really resonates with me, or, that's kind of different, but I like it. It seems to work for my style and just my team. I'm curious, from a leadership principle standpoint, like, is there one that you've leaned into over your career, or maybe even more recently in this new chapter, that might be a little unconventional, right? But it just delivers for you
Yeah.
consistent.
The biggest one for me is, when your team succeeds, you succeed.
Oh,
And I had to learn this directly from a senior member of my company one day. And I remember there was a point where there was an all staff presentation, and I was speaking about a great case study from a client, and there were 4 or 5 members of the team that I was managing on the call, and I was the only one who spoke. And I thought that was the best practice. You're running the business, you share all the information, and it wasn't an ego thing. It was just, this was what I thought you were supposed to do. A couple weeks
right.
later, I spoke with a senior exec. They said, Mark, you need to be quiet, let everyone else talk. Their success is your success. And
Yeah.
Mike, I'm sorry, I hadn't read that. I hadn't learned that. It makes a lot of sense. It wasn't my intent. And that was a complete game changer. Let other people show up, let others people speak on your behalf. It doesn't mean you doing less work. That this is about giving people the opportunity to shine
Yep.
and get out of the way. And the people will recognize just indirectly that of your role as part of that.
Yeah.
That's scary because you really have to trust people to recognize the role that you play. But I would rather, looking back, I would much rather have that and
Mhm.
work for a company that supports recognizing your team to stand up and for leaders to know that you played a role, even if you weren't loud and about it. I would rather work for that type of company than one who says, okay, the head of the department or whatever needs to be the one speaking all the time. And, because that's where you kind of get very cutthroat. That's where you don't see that transparency. It's where you see the gossip. That's not a company I want to be a part of. So that's the biggest lesson that I've learned.
I think that that's a great one because on so many levels it resonates because I can tell you like I was that I was that person for years where I thought that no, in one case it was I thought that's just what you do because you're representing them, but then I was in other cases where it was cutthroat, and it's like I need to be up there to be seen because if I'm not, it's gonna. It's, I think my opinion, I think it's going to diminish. The way that I'm seen, I'm valued, I'm perceived, all of those things that keep a team down because they're looking at you going, there he goes again, you know, hasn't found a microphone or a PowerPoint he doesn't like to stand in front of, especially in front of senior executives, right? So I think that when you're able to put ego aside for a hot second, when you've built trust with senior leadership and they recognize the value you're bringing and the work that you do, and then you have that trust with your team to say, I'm just going to kick this off, but I want you all to get up and talk about this. Please, I think that speaks volumes to, again, let them shine, let them stand out, right? And again, if you've done those parts of building relationship and trust with senior managers and leadership, I think that's important. I don't think what you're suggesting is that if you're a leader and don't like to present or stand up in front of people, that it's best just to let other people do it. That's
Correct.
that's not what you're saying. Uh, Yet, and I don't want to make it sound like an excuse that someone's watching, going, "Oh, awesome! I don't have to get up and talk. I'll have other people do it." But making and building that trust with your senior leaders to know, and even letting them know that, hey, this is part of my style. I want my team to get up there because A, I want them to have the opportunity to shine. I want them to get the opportunity to get up in front of people and speak and build those skills as well. You know?
Absolutely. Because that's going to be part of their success journey, right? Is to be able to practice and model that when they're chatting, whether they're chatting with their colleagues or if they're chatting with prospects and clients, it's be able to practice that and feel like they're in a safe environment. They need to know these skills. And so that's part of their professional development. Back to your point about making sure that we're aligned on that. These should be conversations that happen during the hiring process. They should be how do you recognize great work? How do you empower people to grow within your team? These should be conversations so that there's clarity about how you celebrate that. How do you get out of the way? What are the times in which you do need to be the one that is there front and center? Because to your point, it's not saying that you're offloading that 100% of the time, but we should get very granular on those types of scenarios that make the most sense. And the
That's
more that happens, the better that it is for the company. It's better for the employee as the leader to know when they should lean in and when they should take a step back and allow others to shine.
Yeah, it is a dance. It is a dance, and this if you do it with intention and you're present about it, you have a sense of excellence of what you want it to be. I love this, Mark. This has been a fantastic conversation. I am so glad that you are chasing the sun and the work that you are doing. It is so needed within company cultures. A couple of the things I took away from this conversation, I'm hoping our listeners are taking notes and just taking away one thing. That's all I'd like you to do is take like one nugget from this conversation because there are so many that you can use. But what I heard along the way, I mean, first off, and most powerful is it all starts with the small steps and making a conscious, intentional decision in the moment. Getting back to your weight loss journey, the listening tour I think is absolutely gold. Yet when it is set up the proper way, that this isn't a gotcha tour, this is a listening tour, and that you are thinking about the kickoff communications, sharing the timeline, how it works, what are the topics that we want to get to, what are the expectations we have, here's how we're going to use it, like very, very granular, clear points that the team can understand. So there isn't the what I call the meeting after the meeting, right? Where everyone sits there and they nod their head, and after they leave and they go, "What the heck is that? Are we on notice? What's happening?" Right? So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to just be done. It's going to be very clear. And your last point about this is worth writing down and putting in headlines. When your team succeeds, you succeed. Now, I think that's true when you as a leader are an active participant as a leader in that team's success, and then giving them the opportunity to shine because your ego is over here and you're standing there with pride saying, I am proud of what this team has done, and just let's do more of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. I love it. Mark, tell us before we wrap up, anything on your side that you want to talk about or share with the audience that you have going on or happening that we can help you with or learn more about?
Well, I appreciate that, Mike. We're fellow keynote speakers, which I love on leadership, and I love the diversity of topics that we discuss. I very much focus on creating a culture of well-being. I think culture starts at that team level, kind of back to the listening tour. And so, teams that are looking to make sure that their teams aren't burning out, that they're thinking about communication, love to chat about that. I also talk about empathy and specifically cognitive empathy, the different types, and how that pertains to leadership and building relationship within your team, within leadership, with your clients. I love talking about that. And then another one of my core topics is around the buoyant leader, and it's around how to prioritize your well-being, and not just a physical well-being, but your holistic well-being. And how does that then lend to the well-being of your team? This is something that I've proud to have built over the last few years, and continuing to work with companies and associations to be able to help drive conversations about. It's become incredibly rewarding. And back to what I was sharing at the beginning, it's this is just an example of where this journey has led, to be able to meet great people like you, and who have shared interest. And it's just an honor and pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. And if you are in a position where you're bringing people in to speak and you want someone to come in and talk about cultures of well-being, empathy, please, Mark he is your guy, and you heard a lot of what his premise is here, but he's got so much more. So, Mark, thank you so much again for your time, your insight, and wisdom. For those of you joining and watching, listening in, thank you for your time and energy today. Please drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear something that you took away from this conversation. And until we see each other again on the next show, just remember your best is yet to come. Take care.